It's been almost 6 years, but I still flinch every time my phone rings during heavy rain, because I know it could be him again. In 2018, I was working in coastal Kerala with a disaster response NGO during monsoon season. We were helping families evacuate a low-lying fishing village just outside Alappuzha before a massive cyclone hit. My team included locals and one volunteer I got particularly close with, Arjun. He was the kind of guy who laughed in the face of danger. Always smiling, always joking. But on the third day of the evacuation, Arjun went into one of the flooded houses and never came out. The water was waist-high and rising fast. I waited outside while he checked for an elderly woman reportedly trapped inside. He gave me a thumbs up before going in. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I called out. No answer. So I waited in. The house was dark and eerily still. The woman was gone. But so was Arjun. No splashes, no sounds. Just the creaking of waterlogged wood and the quiet hum of rising panic. We called for backup. Divers. Nothing. They said the currents had likely dragged him out. But the weird thing was, the house didn't have an exit in the direction of the water flow. He couldn't have left without passing me. That night, it stormed harder than ever. And around 2:13 a.m., my phone rang. It was Arjun. His voice was soaked in static, like he was underwater. It's still here, don't come back. Then the call dropped. I thought it was a prank, or maybe his number got spoofed. But the timestamp was real. The call came from his number. I didn't tell anyone. 3 days later, the body of the old woman he went to rescue washed up miles away, bloated but intact. Her eyes were wide open, and her mouth was frozen mid-scream. A week after the cyclone ended, we did a memorial service for Arjun. But then came the second call. Same time, 2:13 a.m. Heavy rain. This time, his voice was calmer. Don't trust the water. It listens. My hair stood on end. I asked who it was, but the line just buzzed. No one ever picked up again during the day. That same night, I had a dream. I was back inside that house. Only it wasn't ruined. It looked new. Fresh paint. Dry. Arjun stood by the door, soaked, pointing to the floor. There was a wet stain moving against gravity, crawling up the wall. Then I woke up. Every monsoon since, I get the call. Always at 2:13 a.m. Always when it's raining. One time, I tried to answer on speaker with friends in the room. The moment I picked up, the power went out. All our phones glitched and restarted. When they came back on, the call log was empty. No incoming calls. But I had a new voicemail. It was just one sentence. They think I'm with them. But I'm not dead. We tried tracking the number. The telecom company said the SIM was deactivated after the accident. But they were stunned when I showed them recent activity logs. They flagged it as an impossible call. I moved inland, away from the sea. I don't work with flood zones anymore. But sometimes, especially during late storms, I think about what Arjun said. Don't trust the water. I believe him now. Because water doesn't just flow. Sometimes it remembers. And sometimes it reaches back. I hadn't seen my uncle in over 12 years. So when he suddenly left me a remote cabin in his will, it felt more like a puzzle than a gift. The directions were handwritten. No coordinates. No GPS signal for miles. Just a trail through the deep woods of northern Montana, past a dry creek bed, under 2 fallen pines, and when the forest gets too quiet, look right. And it did get quiet. Birdsong stopped. Wind ceased. Even the buzzing insects disappeared like they'd been muted. That's when I saw the roof through the trees. It looked like something from a survivalist movie. One-room log cabin, rusting chimney, a porch that sagged with age. Inside was clean, though untouched. Like someone had just walked out the day before. A kettle still sat on the stove. A flannel jacket was draped on a chair. I found a note nailed to the wall. If you hear her voice, do not answer. And never say your name out loud. At first, I thought it was a prank. My uncle always had a weird sense of humor. But that night changed everything. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember because I couldn't sleep and kept checking my phone. No signal, no internet, just that useless clock. Then I heard it. A woman's voice. Distant. Singing. The tune was old. Off-key. It floated in from the woods, getting louder with each line. Come down, the fire's low. Your bed is cold and filled with snow. I froze. I hadn't passed another soul on my drive in. Then she stopped singing and whispered, I know you're in there. I dropped to the floor, heart pounding. I didn't move for an hour. At sunrise, I opened the front door. Nothing but morning fog. but in the mud right outside, bare footprints. Deep, small, like a child's. I packed my things, tried to leave, but the path was gone. The trees had shifted, or maybe I had. Every trail I followed looped me back to the cabin. By dusk, I was circling like prey. The silence closed in again. Back inside, I found a second note, this one folded into my backpack. I never put it there. You're not the first. She listens for names. She follows them. That night, she returned. This time, closer. Her voice was right outside the cabin, whispering through the cracks in the wall. Who are you? I bit my lip to stay silent. You don't belong here. The walls groaned. The windows fogged from the inside. Something pressed against the door. Not a knock, just wait. I didn't sleep. When morning came, I found the forest path had changed again. This time, it led me away. Back to the dry creek. Back to my car. I drove 13 hours straight to get home. That night, I unpacked my bag. Tucked between two shirts was a third note. This one was in a child's handwriting. Thanks for telling me your name in your sleep. I used to think horror was just fiction, ghost stories told around campfires, or twisted ideas dreamed up by movie directors. But then I spent a summer in Rajasthan, and now I know the truth. It was 2017. I was volunteering with a heritage preservation group cataloging forgotten ruins across rural India. One village, Rani Kheda, wasn't even on Google Maps. That should have been the first red flag. They assigned me to document an abandoned haveli on the edge of the village. Locals called it Chuppi Mahal, the silent palace. It had no doors left, just gaping frames. Birds wouldn't nest there. Stray dogs wouldn't enter. Even the wind avoided the windows. I was told to never go alone. Naturally, I went alone. I arrived at noon. The heat was unbearable, but the inside of the haveli was cool. Still, as I stepped inside, I felt like I'd crossed into another era and another world. The walls were scorched in places, burn marks, but no fire damage. Chains were nailed into the stone floor of one room, and the nails had names carved beneath them. In one room, I found a well, not for water, but for something else. It was sealed with stone slabs and iron reinforcements. On the largest slab, scratched in rust-colored chalk, was the word Zinda, alive. Then came the whispers. I thought it was my own breath echoing at first. But no, it was female. Close. Matt Colo. Don't open it. My flashlight flickered. My skin broke into cold sweat in the 45-degree heat. Then I heard scratching from beneath the slab. Fingernails. No mistaking it. Slow. Desperate. Like someone trapped and trying to claw their way out. I ran. Back to the guest house, pale and shaking. The caretaker was waiting. His expression changed the moment he saw my face. You heard her, didn't you? He asked. I didn't reply, but my silence was answer enough. That night, he told me the village's dark truth. The haveli once belonged to a wealthy man who had a daughter born under a cursed lunar cycle. Locals said she would bring death to the family. He tried to hide her, but strange deaths followed. His wife, servants, even livestock. Eventually, he chained her underground, alive, and sealed the well. She died clawing at the stones, screaming to be let out. But she never left. She scratches every night from beneath the well, still alive in some form. Still waiting. I asked why the stone wasn't destroyed. The caretaker looked at me, eyes heavy. They tried. The men who broke the slab went insane. One gouged his eyes out, saying she burned her face into his vision. I didn't sleep. The next day, I packed my bags and arranged an early return. But before I left, I went back to the haveli one last time. Don't ask me why. Maybe I needed to see it again. Maybe I wanted to prove something to myself. I stood over the slab. The word Zinda had been scratched over with something new, fresh, still red. So no, listen, that's when I heard it again. But this time, not just scratching. Main Bahar Aa Gai Hoon. I've come out. My heart stopped. Something brushed my ankle. When I looked down, there was a smear of red, wet handprints around the base of the slab, too fresh to be old. I didn't wait. I ran again. For good. I haven't been back to India since. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I hear scratching from under the floorboards. And once, just once, I heard the same whisper. Matt Colo. Only this time, she was warning me. Something else had followed her out. I never believed in ghosts. But after what happened at my grandfather's land in Assam, I don't believe in silence either. He passed away last year. left behind a secluded house near a dried-up lake. The property was surrounded by forest, hours from the nearest town. No neighbors, no reception. I took a few weeks off to settle his estate, clear the house, and maybe enjoy some isolation. But that place didn't want to be alone. The first thing I noticed was the lake. More like a pit, dried, cracked earth where water once was. Locals said it disappeared overnight. Others said the lake had never really been there at all. They also warned me not to be outside after sunset. Said you could hear screaming from the lake bed. I laughed it off. Until the second night. It started with whispers. I was sitting in the living room going through old documents when I heard something outside. Not footsteps. Not an animal. Whispering. In Assamese. A language I didn't speak. It was coming from the direction of the lake. I turned off the lights. Peeked through the window. A woman stood at the edge of the dry pit, facing the house. She wasn't moving. Not even blinking. Just staring. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her sari looked centuries old, clinging to her like it was soaked. She opened her mouth, but the sound didn't match. It was a scream. Low, vibrating, like it came from the earth itself. I stepped back. The lights flickered. Then everything went dark, and she was gone. The next morning, I walked to the lake with sunlight at my back. I wanted proof that it happened. Nothing. Just cracked dirt and a few scattered weeds. But there were footprints. Barefoot. Coming from the lake. Not going to it. I told myself I was sleep-deprived. Maybe stressed. I stayed up that night, just to make sure. And the screaming returned. But this time, it didn't come from outside. It came from beneath the house. The floorboards vibrated with it, like something was screaming upward through the foundations. My ears bled. My nose dripped. The air turned metallic, sharp like iron. I ran outside, and that's when I saw them. More of them. Pale figures, standing in the lake bed. 5, maybe 6. All wearing ragged clothing. All of them staring at the house. Not screaming anymore. Just watching. The next day, I went to the local panchayat office. I needed answers. An old man finally told me. They were drowned. All of them. The British built a dam upstream in 1883. Flooded the village. Your grandfather's land used to be a village. No bodies were ever recovered. Locals said the souls stayed behind, in the lake that buried them. But that wasn't the worst part. He showed me a photograph. Faded, black and white. It was from before the flood. I couldn't breathe. The woman in the sari, the one who screamed. She was standing next to my grandfather. That night, I burned everything. His furniture, his clothes, even the deed. I left before sunrise, swearing never to return. But sometimes, when it rains hard enough here in Guwahati, I swear I can hear the screaming again. Muffled, distant, and wet. They say if a place feels wrong, you should trust your gut. I didn't. And now I can't close my eyes without seeing her. Last October, I took a solo trip to clear my head. I booked a remote cabin on the far end of Old Hollow Lake, an overgrown, glass-still body of waterway out in northern Minnesota. The only other structure near me was an old, abandoned cabin directly across the lake. My host said no one had lived there for decades. The first 2 nights were peaceful. Crisp air, crackling firewood, silence. But on the third night, I woke up to the sound of a splash, like someone had jumped into the water. I checked outside. Nothing. Until I looked across the lake. The cabin. It had a light on. I stared for a long time, trying to convince myself it was moonlight or a reflection. But then someone moved behind the window. A slow shadow. Back and forth. I messaged the owner. No answer. By sunrise, the light was gone. I told myself it must have been a trick of the eyes. Maybe the full moon. Maybe animals. Night 4. Another splash. This time louder. Closer. Like someone was walking through the shallows. I stayed in bed, heart pounding, forcing myself not to look. But the urge won. I peeked through the curtain and saw wet footprints on my porch. Small, barefoot, muddy, leading up to my door and stopping there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Morning came. No footprints. No moisture. Nothing. I felt insane. I tried hiking back to my car, just to leave, but I couldn't find the trail I came in on. GPS refused to load. The forest looped back on itself. I was trapped. So that night, I decided to stay awake with the lights on. 3:42 a.m. Splash. 3:43 a.m. Wet footsteps. 3:44 a.m. Knocking on the window. 3 times. I couldn't move. Then I saw her. Pale. Thin. Dripping. Hair hanging in long black strands like moss. She was standing by the trees, watching, just watching. The light from the cabin across the lake flicked on again. This time, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the window across the lake, there was a mirror, and it showed my cabin. And in that mirror, there were two people in my room. I turned around so fast I fell over the chair. No one was there. But when I looked back across the lake, the woman was gone. The light was off. I packed up everything at dawn and ran through the forest, following the sun until I found the road. I never went back for my things. The owner never responded. Weeks later, I Googled Old Hollow Lake. One headline came up from 1984. Family drowns in cabin fire after daughter falls through ice. Only the mirror survives. I swear on everything. The mirror in that photo matched the one I saw across the lake. Every few months, I dream of water, dark water, and the sound of footsteps approaching my bed. I don't care if you believe me, but if you ever visit the old railway tunnel near Beira, Maharashtra, don't whistle. I was 26 when this happened. A solo backpacking trip across India, chasing forgotten places, abandoned sites, and local legends. I had read about a collapsed railway tunnel near a defunct hydroelectric station, supposedly haunted. Locals warned me. They said people went missing. Some said you'd hear someone whistle back, even if you were alone. That, of course, made me want to go more. I arrived just after noon. The air was still. Trees leaned unnaturally toward the tunnel like they were listening. There were signs of trespassing, beer cans, plastic wrappers, but the entrance itself was pitch black. I stepped in. The temperature dropped instantly, like I had walked into a cave of ice. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. The walls were soaked, the ceiling dripping. About 50 feet in, the tunnel curved slightly. That's when I remembered the warning, and, stupidly, I whistled. It echoed once, twice, then silence. Then, another whistle, softer, not mine, from deeper inside. Not a bird, not wind. I froze. Logic said it could be another explorer, or maybe an echo delayed by acoustics. But my body didn't believe that. I turned around, ready to leave. That's when I saw her, just outside the tunnel. A girl, maybe 20, barefoot, hair soaked and covering half her face. White dress, torn. She stood perfectly still, staring in. I stepped closer. "Are you okay?" I asked. No answer. I blinked, and she was gone. I ran out. Spent the rest of the day pretending I imagined it. Told myself it was stress. That night, I checked into a cheap guest house. Took a hot shower. Tried to sleep. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke up to a dripping sound. My tap was off. The bathroom dry, but the hallway outside my room was wet. Footprints, barefoot, leading to my door. Then a knock. I didn't move. I just stared. 3 knocks. Then silence. I opened the door slowly. Nothing, except a long strand of wet hair stuck to the doorknob. I packed my things and left at dawn. Got on the next bus to Pune. Thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Back in my apartment a week later, things started happening. My phone rang once every night at 1:33 a.m. No number, just static. Sometimes it sounded like breathing. I changed phones, changed numbers. Still happened. One night, I forgot to lock the bathroom door. At 1:33, I woke up to the sound of the faucet running. Inside, the mirror was fogged over. One word written in the condensation, whistle. I started hearing it in my dreams. That faint sound, an answer to a call I should never have made. And always that girl. Hair wet, head tilted, standing in the dark. Closer each time. I tried therapy. One psychiatrist said I had survivor's guilt. Another said I might have sleep paralysis. But none of that explains what happened 2 weeks ago. I visited my parents. Thought being around family would help. That night, while helping my mom with laundry, I opened the dryer and found something tangled in the sheets. A wet, white cloth. It smelled like earth and mildew. And inside, wrapped like a gift, was a strand of her hair. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. Now I keep the lights on. I don't travel. I barely sleep. Because I know something followed me from that tunnel. And I think she's waiting for the day I whistle again. And when I do, she won't just answer. She'll arrive. When I moved into my new apartment, I didn't expect the lease to come with a warning. Don't unlock the basement door. Ever. That's what the old woman said, the landlady. She looked me dead in the eye and said it again before handing me the key. It's for your own good. I laughed it off at first. It was a basement, not a portal to hell. The apartment was perfect. Cheap, quiet, on the edge of town. A little old, sure, but it had charm. The door in question was a thick, wooden one in my kitchen. Iron latch, no knob. Looked ancient. The moment I touched it, something felt wrong. I asked around. My neighbor, Derek, lived one floor up. He was cagey. Said he'd heard noises too. No one's opened it in years, he muttered. Don't be the first. That night, I heard the first sound. It came from under the floor, beneath the kitchen table. A slow dragging noise, like something being pulled across concrete. I froze. Then came the knock. 3 soft knocks from the other side of the door. I called the landlady. No answer. I texted Derek. Nothing. I slept on the couch, away from the kitchen. The next morning, I found scratches around the basement doorframe, like fingernails. Still, I convinced myself it was mice or rats. Something normal. Until night 3. 3:09 a.m. A creaking sound woke me. I walked into the kitchen and found the latch unhooked. I hadn't touched it. The door was open just an inch. From inside, a whisper. Please let me out. I slammed it shut and pushed the kitchen table against it. Later that day, I demanded answers from the landlady. Her face went pale when I told her the door had moved. She knows you live there now, she whispered. You made noise. She hears every step. When I asked who she was, she told me a story. In 1972, a girl named Elsie lived in my unit. One day, she snapped, killed her mother, and buried her body beneath the basement. When the police came, Elsie was locked inside, repeating one phrase. She told me to do it. They said she was talking about her mother, but she said something else. The woman in the basement made me do it. She died in the asylum 6 months later. Suicide. After that, they sealed the basement. That night, I didn't sleep. The dragging returned. The knocking. This time, it didn't stop after 3. It kept going. 4, 5, 6. Each one louder. Angrier. Then came the voice. A childlike voice. It's cold down here. Don't you want to see me? I put in earbuds. Cranked white noise. Around 4 a.m., the power went out. Silence swallowed the apartment. No hum. No buzz. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs from the basement. Slow. Barefoot. Wet. I ran outside barefoot, shirtless, into the October cold. I slept in my car. By sunrise, I worked up the courage to return. The door was wide open. On the basement steps, written in dust. Next time, I won't knock. I broke my lease. Moved across town. A week later, Derek messaged me. The door opened again last night. She was calling your name. I blocked him. I don't want to know more. But sometimes, I still hear her whisper. In dreams. In silence. Please let me out. I used to think the stories about haunted houses were just that, stories. I don't think that anymore. It was last winter when I moved into that apartment on the top floor of an old building in Kolkata. The rent was cheap, the space spacious, and I thought it would be the perfect place for a quiet few months. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't the smell of mildew or the creaky floors. It was the window. It was an old-fashioned thing, a large pane of glass with wooden frames. But what bothered me the most was how it faced the other building, directly into a neighboring apartment. No blinds, no curtains, just wide open. I didn't think much of it at first. It was late, I was tired, and I went straight to bed. That's when I noticed him. At midnight, a man standing in the window across from mine. He was tall, thin, with dark hair that fell across his face. He was staring right at me. It was unsettling, but I told myself it was probably someone else moving in, maybe someone curious about the new neighbor. So I went to bed, trying to shake the feeling. But the next night, it happened again. And again. At exactly midnight, the man was there. Always staring. Always still. I started to wonder if I was imagining it, but the third night sealed it. I tried to stay up, to watch him, but my eyelids grew heavy, and I eventually fell asleep. At 12 a.m., I woke up suddenly. The room was pitch black. My phone read 12:02. I sat up in bed. The window was still open. I stood up, cautiously, and peeked through the blinds. There was no one there. Relieved, I closed the blinds and went back to bed. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something wasn't right. The following week, I got curious. I visited the building next door during the day to see if I could find out more about the strange figure. The landlord mentioned that the building had been empty for months, and that the previous tenant, an old man, had passed away suddenly a few years ago. I didn't think much of it at the time. That night, I had a visitor. It was around 11:45 p.m. when I heard it. the slow, deliberate scratching against my window. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I stared at the dark window, not daring to approach. Then, I heard it, the soft sound of whispering, almost like someone was talking to me through the glass. The whispering grew louder. "I see you." I couldn't move. My heart raced, thumping in my chest. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. I wasn't imagining it anymore. Someone was outside my window. The scratching stopped, and there was a long pause. And then, I heard it. The tap. It was a slow tap, like a finger drumming against the window. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted out of my apartment and ran down the stairs into the street, breathing heavily. I stood in the cold for what felt like hours, too scared to go back up. The next day, I decided to leave. I went back into my apartment to gather my things. But when I looked out the window, I froze. There, in the same apartment across from mine, was the man again. This time, he was smiling. Not just a smile, but a grin, wide, grotesque, and bloodshot eyes staring into mine. I packed my bags and left immediately. I never looked back. But every time I pass that street, I can't help but glance up. I know he's still there, waiting. I've always been fascinated by antiques. Old furniture, vintage mirrors, paintings. There's something about the history embedded in them that draws me in. That's how I ended up buying the mirror. It was an impulse purchase, honestly. I found it in a dusty shop on the outskirts of town. A small, cluttered place I'd passed by hundreds of times, but never bothered to enter. That day was different. The mirror stood in the back, framed in tarnished gold with intricate carvings of vines and birds. It looked ancient, maybe even centuries old. Something about it felt wrong, but in a way that made me want it more. I took it home that same afternoon. The first night, everything seemed fine. I hung it above the fireplace, admiring how it added character to the room. But when I stood in front of it, I noticed something strange. My reflection didn't match my movements. It wasn't that it was delayed or anything like that. It was more like it wasn't me. The figure in the mirror looked like me, but it wasn't. It had my features, my clothing, but its eyes, they didn't blink. It stared at me, motionless, while I moved. I thought it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. But it happened again the next night. This time, I stood still in front of the mirror, staring into it for several minutes, trying to make sense of what was going on. The reflection still didn't move. I blinked. It didn't blink. It wasn't like some paranormal ghost thing, either. It was as if the reflection had become its own entity, a being separate from me, watching me while I couldn't control it. I decided to cover the mirror with a blanket, hoping it would help. The blanket stayed in place for a few days, but the feeling of being watched never went away. Then, things escalated. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home exhausted. I walked into the living room, took the blanket off the mirror without thinking, and looked in. I froze. The reflection of myself was no longer standing still. It was moving. It was grinning. I stumbled backward, falling into the couch. My heart hammered in my chest as I tried to comprehend what I was seeing. I took a step closer to the mirror, unsure if I was imagining things. Then I saw it. In the reflection, my figure wasn't alone. Standing beside me was something dark, something wrong. It was a shadow, but it was too solid to be a trick of the light. It was tall, thin, with hollow eyes. It grinned too, its mouth unnaturally wide, filled with teeth. I tried to look away, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, staring at the figure that wasn't me. The reflection began to laugh. Not in the way I would. This laugh was cold, mocking, and sharp. The thing in the mirror turned its head toward me and whispered, "You should have never taken me home." I backed away from the mirror, finally able to move, and ran out of the house. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I decided I had to get rid of the mirror. I couldn't explain what had happened, but I knew it wasn't something I wanted to live with. When I returned to my apartment to remove the mirror, it was already gone. There was no trace of it. No shattered glass, no frame, nothing. It was as if it had never been there at all. But I know it wasn't just a dream. I know what I saw. And every time I walk past a reflective surface, I swear I can still see it, waiting. I never believed in haunted houses. At least, not until I stayed in one. It was an old, crumbling estate on the outskirts of town, Blackwood Manor. The kind of place you'd see in horror movies, hidden behind overgrown hedges and centuries-old oak trees. The manor had been abandoned for years, but recently, someone had bought it and turned it into a bed and breakfast. I needed a break, so I thought, why not? The price was cheap, the location secluded, and I needed to clear my mind. Plus, it looked beautiful in the pictures online. When I arrived, the place felt off. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange, faded paintings. The floor creaked under my feet, and I could swear I heard whispers echoing through the halls. I thought it was just my imagination. The innkeeper, an older woman with piercing eyes, greeted me warmly. Her smile was polite, but there was something strange about the way she looked at me, like she knew something I didn't. She handed me the key to my room, a small, cozy chamber with an antique four-poster bed and dark wooden furniture. I settled in, unpacking my things, and tried to relax. But as nightfall approached, a sense of unease crept over me. Around midnight, I heard the whispers. At first, they were soft, almost inaudible. I brushed it off as the wind. But then they grew louder, as though someone was speaking just beyond the walls of my room. Curious, I got out of bed and stood by the door, listening. The words were unintelligible, a strange language that sent chills down my spine. They seemed to be coming from within the walls themselves. I stepped closer to the wall and pressed my ear against it. And then, I heard a voice, clear and sharp, "Help me." I stumbled back, my heart racing. No one was supposed to be in the house, but the voice was so real, so desperate. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a draft or the house settling. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The whispers continued that night. They didn't stop. It felt like they were all around me, growing louder with each passing hour. It was as if the very walls were alive, breathing, speaking. The next morning, I went down to breakfast, trying to shake off the unease. The innkeeper was there, smiling as usual. But when I mentioned the strange noises, her face paled slightly, and she quickly changed the subject. That night, the whispers returned. But this time, they weren't just whispers. The walls seemed to throb with the voices, as though they were alive. I could hear a distinct pattern in the words now. "Let me out. Free me. It's too late." I couldn't stand it any longer. I grabbed my things and decided to leave. But when I opened the door, something stopped me. The hallway was empty, but there was a door at the end of the corridor that hadn't been there before. It was a small, wooden door, tucked in between the walls. My curiosity got the better of me. I walked toward it, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The door creaked open as I reached for the handle, and inside, I saw something I'll never forget. It was a small room, and in the center stood a mirror, a tall, full-length mirror. But it wasn't just any mirror. It was dark, with a thick layer of dust covering the glass. The reflection didn't look like the room around me. Instead, it was a dark, empty space, black and cold. As I stared into the mirror, I began to feel watched. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't take my eyes off it. And then I saw it. A face. A pale, hollow face staring back at me from within the mirror. It had hollow eyes, a twisted grin, and something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the reflection of the room. It was something else. I backed away slowly, my body frozen in fear. The whispers turned into screams, deafening and desperate. The walls around me seemed to close in. I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me, and ran down the stairs. But when I reached the lobby, I found the innkeeper waiting for me. She was standing by the door, a grim look on her face. "You should have never gone into that room," she said, her voice low and steady. "Once you've seen it, it doesn't let you leave." I didn't understand what she meant until I turned to look out the window. The manor wasn't the same anymore. The walls were cracked, the windows broken. It looked like it had been abandoned for years, not just hours. I never went back to Blackwood Manor. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the whispers again, "Let me out." And I know they'll find me one day.